Can I welcome all members here today for this extremely important topic entitled Political and Humanitarian Situation in Kashmir, and we're going to be led off by David Ward.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Sullivan, and it's very good to be here, appearing before you today. It really would be, completely wrong to do anything other than start this debate without reference to the devastating floods that have taken place. And so much of the areas, both sides of the line of control, have literally been devastated. And the press quotes that are coming in on an hourly basis paint a very, very grim picture for us. And we hear of the loss of life, substantial loss of life on both sides of the line of control. Sadly, and in some ways this is an indication of the problem that we do face, that the press reports I've just recently received talk about the loss of life and the million people who are deprived of basic services, but then goes on to quite hopefully refer to the Prime Ministers of both India and Pakistan offering each other help at the weekend to deal with the disaster, which temporarily, I'm pleased to say, diverted attention away from fighting along the border, but alas, not for long. And the latest we heard on Wednesday was violence had flared up again on the line of control, and about 24 soldiers fighting militants, even as flood rescue operations were underway elsewhere. 3 militants were shot dead by Indian troops in Kashmir after a gun battle. And similarly, on the other side, we hear comments from Pakistan about a prominent Islamist accusing India of water terrorism, can you believe? Of causing flooding across the border by discharging dam water downstream. As I say, all in that short space of time, we see the seriousness of the issue, but also the despair which many, many, many people here and across the world must feel when they consider the Kashmir conflict. Just a little bit more on the details. The latest I received from the European Commission's Humanitarian Office states that in Pakistan-administered Kashmir, the flooding has caused 231 deaths. This would undoubtedly be more now. 401 people have been injured and 580,000 people have been affected. 1,460 villages, 5,400 houses partially damaged, and 2,400 destroyed. In India, over 200 people have been killed, 50,000 have been rescued with help from the Indian Army. But as I mentioned, over 1 million have been affected by the flooding, cutting off the basic services. In addition to the response to the general debate on the long-standing conflict between India and Pakistan that has prompted this debate, I would really welcome a response from the Minister on the government's response to the situation, the humanitarian crisis that's being faced in both sides of the line of control as we speak. Just some thanks. First of all, a thanks to the honourable members for Bury North and for Pendle for coming along and supporting the call for the debate, and of course to the Backbench Business Committee for granting it. And the honourable member for Birmingham Yardley couldn't actually come along in support because he was a member of that committee, but I know that he supported this debate himself. I'd also like to thank many people, really, the Jammu Kashmir self-determination movement in Europe for supporting this debate and giving me their support and for really galvanising support across the whole of the country, hoping to get many thousands of signatures on the petition that demanded this debate. I've spoken to a lot of groups and organisations, some of which I will refer to later in my speech, but I found the contribution from the Kashmir Development Foundation of real help and value to me, and particularly in terms of the importance of the Indian and Pakistani and Kashmiri diaspora and the international, as well as within this country, positive impact that they could have on the situation in Kashmir. The debate is long overdue. Certainly.
Philip Davis. I'd like to start, Mr Holborn, by apologising to you and my parliamentary neighbour for the fact that I can't stay for the whole debate because of other meetings. But in doing all of these thanks, would he also like to join me in personally thanking Raja Hussain for all the work he does in promoting the Kashmiri cause, both in Bradford but also around the country? And would he agree with me that at the time when we're allowing self-determination for people in Scotland, and whereas people like me want a self-determination as to whether we want to be part of the European Union, it's only right that people in Kashmir should also have exactly the same opportunity for self-determination of their own future?
Well, first of all, I would just echo the words in terms of Raja Hussain and many others, really, who have stuck at this over such a long period of time. And the question of self-determination, I'll come on to as a particular area that I want to focus on a little later. I said that the debate is long overdue. There have been many, I think, thousands of parliamentary questions asked about Kashmir in the House of Commons, but I believe the last time a Kashmir, what I would call a Kashmir dedicated debate, which comprehensively sought to look at the issues of political and humanitarian, the situation in Kashmir, I think it took place in 1999, believe it or not, 15 years ago. The conflict in Kashmir was covered in a debate in the main chamber only, I think, a few years ago. I think it's 2011. I believe the Honourable Member for Wickham was very much behind that. But it was a shared debate, and a significant amount of time had to be shared with yes, sir.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way on that point, and in respect of the debate in the chamber, would my honourable friend note that actually this is part of having a backbench business committee, which allows backbenchers to drive what is debated by Parliament and was not allocated in government time.
David Ward.
Indeed, it's proved to be extremely valuable because it allows us to raise issues which in themselves may not seem a vast area of importance, but to those particular groups it allows us to focus. And I'm thinking at this present time of the Honourable Member for Rochdale, who had a German debate on the census and the Kashmiri involvement in the census, which would not be allowed. We wouldn't be able to have the opportunity without these debates to raise those sorts of issues. I believe that 3 hours is justified, and of course it is, as you can see, very welcome. The Kashmir conflict is both long-standing and it is actually complex. The former princely state is divided, as we know, as one-third as Azad AJK, two-thirds Indian administered or control, and other parts, as we know, including Gilgit-Baltistan, administered by Pakistan, Chinese-administered disputed regions of Aksai Chin and Trans-Karakoram Tract. This much we know. Over 24 years ago, I stood as a parliamentary by-election candidate in the seat I eventually managed to win. And I asked my party for a briefing on Kashmir. And it was provided for me. Now, I'd already been a councillor for 6 years in the area. I knew of the issue, but I thought I'd better be, shows you how young and naive I was, I thought I'd better be on message at that time. Moving on. The response came back was what I would call safe and predictable. If asked on the doorstep at a public meeting about the Kashmir issue, then United Nations resolution, self-determination, plebiscite, that was the safe thing to say. I suspect that's the briefing that all candidates from all parties will have received. Now, I've probably attended over many of them largely responsibility of Raja Najab Hussain, I have to say, but I've probably attended something like 300 meetings in Bradford and here over the last 30 years on this subject, and the message has not really changed very much at all. And many of you, I know, will have been to meetings in your own areas and attended those meetings, and a succession of speakers turn up, more or less say the same thing, to a round of applause, followed by another speaker, followed by another speaker, and then we go and have a meal.
I thank my honourable friend and congratulate him on the debate. Would he agree with me that one of the difficulties with conflicts, long-standing conflicts, is that the temperature gets raised as a result of human rights abuses, and that actually a focus on dealing with human rights abuses is not just a good in itself, but also assists in resolving the political problems in the long term?
David Moore.
It's what I would regard as being a constant cause of the conflict itself, and as I will get on to mention later on, we've had periods of calm, we've had periods of progress, and then something happens which then freezes the good progress that has been made, and very often that's because of the abuses, the violations that have taken place. Just on the debate itself, it seems a prevailing view, certainly in India, and from what I've read in the press, and the Indian High Commission in the UK, I believe, has contributed, saying that this debate is not welcome, the House of Commons should not be poking our noses into someone else's business. Well, the House of Commons briefing also includes a quote from, I think, the BJP State President, referring to this debate as a brazen interference in the internal affairs of India, and that J&K is a settled issue and cannot be reopened under any pretext whatever. It doesn't seem to be a very settled issue to me, I have to say. Also, very kindly received a message from Mr. Balwinder Singh Dillon, who wrote to me yesterday, I think it was yesterday or the day before, saying, "I'm very concerned why our members of Parliament are wasting their valuable time and resources to promote these key ringleaders of these terrorist organisations." I'm not aware, in fact I know I have not done that, but it does show something about the degree of emotion that surrounds this area. A press release that came out and was actually in the Asian Light newspaper, and I think it was supported by the Indian High Commission. It names the Deputy High Commissioner, I believe, and it says, "I call this debate because I have many Muslims in my..." I've heard this one before, by the way. "I have many Muslims in my constituency who have pressured me into doing this." I have to tell you, I am not very good at responding to pressure. It's actually quite offensive when people make that comments about me. Talking of the Deputy Prime Minister, it's quoted in the Times of India earlier, I think it was in August, but then it's been resurrected, saying that Britain does not want to be a mediator between India and Pakistan over Kashmir. And I accept that. I don't think I've ever suggested that. But there is a massive difference between mediation and the offer of help. And I'll come on to that again later. What I do welcome was the Deputy Prime Minister making it categorically clear that he did not oppose the debate in itself, and that we had a right to discuss whatever we want to discuss, but I will go further to justify that a little bit later. Now, I have no qualms, to be honest, about raising the issue of Kashmir in this Parliament. There is, and we cannot escape it, a British legacy here. And I think we have a responsibility now, not as much as a right, as an obligation to take an interest in Kashmir. I really do. And beyond that, not just a mild interest from a distance, but to actually offer help to resolve the conflict. I do not take the view that Britain is interfering. I believe we're highlighting the importance of resolving the issue, if that ever needs to be done, for all inhabitants of the region. Not one side, not the other, but all inhabitants. And ultimately, to consider the propensity for terrorist acts to be undertaken anywhere in the world as a result of conflict in one part of the world, certainly makes it of interest to us as well. Now, efforts to resolve the conflict have so far been unsuccessful. We've just got to be honest about this. Both India and Pakistan have always maintained that this is a matter for them alone, and that will maybe be suggested today. And we know about the similar agreement, Lahore Agreement, and we know that that is the line that is taken. There have been many, all the way from Sir Owen Dixon, all the way through to the improvements and progress that was being made post 2003, right up to today. Even the 15 boxes of mangoes that have been sent recently, I believe. Maybe we need more mangoes. Sorry, this was a gift from the Pakistan to India following the. Anyway, we do need what may be regarded as gestures, but positive gestures. We've had so many false starts in terms of the progress on reaching agreement, and they have faltered. We know they have faltered for various reasons, including awful, atrocious terror attacks in India, infringements across the line of control, and I referred to those taking place even with the devastation that's currently facing both sides of the line of control to the floods. It may have been domestic politics in India, and it could be the political instability in Pakistan. But for whatever reason, just as progress is being made towards some sort of normalisation, there's then a freeze. Now, the constant cry from Kashmiris is that they themselves have been overlooked as major stakeholders, and their exclusion from peace talks has led to frustration and growing disenchantment, particularly, of course, for those who seek independence from both India and from Pakistan. I was really welcome the contribution I received from the Kashmir Initiative Group. They've made the observation, Kashmir Initiative Group, they've made the observation that whilst it is common to hear about the trust deficit between Delhi and Islamabad, which we're all familiar with, the trust deficit that has developed in Jammu and Kashmir over the years is seldom discussed. Now, there have been periods of calm when greater progress could have been made. There have been opportunities. There was fertile ground for greater progress to be made. But the danger is that in the absence of a genuine political initiative in Kashmir, it will leave the region susceptible to a resurgence of violence at any time. Now, I'm not the first, and others may refer to this, but I'm not the first to make the comment about the withdrawal of NATO-led forces, the International Security Assistance Force from Afghanistan, and the added challenges that this could bring to Kashmir. With the increasing rise of extreme jihadists and NATO forces departing Afghanistan, well, to quote the former Prime Minister of AJK, Barrister Sultan Mahmood Chowdhury, who was here meeting MPs this week through the APPG, there is real danger in what he called unemployed jihadists looking for new opportunities within the unresolved Kashmir conflict, whether they are invited or not to take part. Therefore, further escalation of the conflict through acts of terror could be perpetrated in the name of the unresolved issue over Jammu and Kashmir, and that's of interest to everybody internationally, not just in that area. The issue of removing Article 370, and others may comment on this as well, from the Indian Constitution, which, and it's been eroded over time, we know that, but it does grant Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir autonomous status within the country, and a controversial and divisive step to even discuss this at this time could be a catalyst that sparks an uncontrollable and dangerous escalation in the conflict, becoming a magnet, and I've already referred to one possible source, becoming a magnet for disenchanted jihadists. But you know, if a further justification for Parliament's interests in this conflict is needed, I just return to my own constituents. Each time I meet members of the JKLF or the JK, Jammu Kashmir National Independence Alliance, it becomes very, very clear to me that the Kashmir conflict is not one that is just a mere matter of interest to them, something that they read about. It's an anguish that burns within them and never leaves them at all. This is not an issue which they just read occasionally, I say in newspapers, something that happened a long way away, but one that gets fed directly to them through strong family links. And if you visit the area, and I know many have, and you're walking down, whether it's the High Street in Mirpur, walk into a shop and somebody asks you if you know their cousin on Nottingham Street, you begin to understand the links that exist and why it's so important. Nottingham Street in Bradford, by the way. Now, seeking a final resolution to the Kashmir question is hugely important for world peace, I believe. I think it is that serious because the potential still exists for India and Pakistan to go to war. And if we think back to December 2001, when both armies mobilised on the brink of something terrifying, when international frontier maps were produced of where potential nuclear strike might occur, or indeed November 2008, of course, the atrocious Mumbai attack, which I referred to earlier. You only have to think about this to realise that the longer the issue remains unresolved, the more dangerous it becomes in this already dangerous world in which we all live. Now, despite criticism from various quarters, this debate is actually timely, after a long period of relative calm and with new political leaders in both India and Pakistan, we now find ourselves with a period of opportunity to discuss new and perhaps more fruitful avenues in order to achieve peace and security for the Kashmiri people. It may sound controversial, and this is where, it may sound controversial to some, but I actually long ago ditched the party line on the aspiration that peace can be attained through a plebiscite. I just don't think it will happen. The long-awaited plebiscite seems to me to no longer be a route towards a solution, but instead a contributor to the ongoing conflict. What is the point in a referendum when the outcome will not be accepted by the loser? What is the point? Would we be having a Scottish referendum if we believed that whoever lost would take up military arms? Was a referendum the answer in Ireland, in Northern Ireland? Maybe. in Northern Ireland, and we knew that the result of an all-Ireland referendum or whatever form was taken would not have resulted in people saying, well, we lost. So it's crucial that I think we accept reality. But what the proposed plebiscite did offer, and let us not forget that the plebiscite did not offer the third option of an independent state of Kashmir. It was not one of the things that was promised. But what it did offer was the inclusion of Kashmiris in being involved in deciding on their own future. That was the value of it. It offered them the opportunity to have a say in what their future would be. And I believe that this really vital element, I believe can still be achieved. I really do. But if this is to be a part of a future, then a plebiscite needs to be viewed as simply a means to an end, not the end in itself. Surely the end should be peace and security in Kashmir and for the people who live there. And the question then becomes, how can those within the former princely state who have suffered for so long have some sort of say in what their future should be? You know, sometimes to get to what can be, we just have to accept what cannot be.
To what the Honourable Gentleman says, and although I find myself struggling to agree with much of what he's saying, it's not right to say that the people of Kashmir don't have a say in their future. At the last election, 61% of them participated in the state elections. There will be elections again this year in 2014. There is a democratic process, and it's a democratic process that sits as part of the world's greatest democracy.
Thank you very much. I mean, I was approached by someone who said that one of the things that should happen is that the separatists should be fully engaged in the elections.
On that point, I thank the Honourable for giving way. The intervention by his honourable friend talks about the previous election. And I think the real issue here, when he raises the issue of that election, was that how many international observers, how many European Union observers, or observers of any kind were allowed in that election to take place to justify the figures that he's just given. David Ward.
I raised the issue of taking part in the elections, and the answer came, we just don't trust the elections. We just do not think they will be fair. We have no confidence in those elections.
Would you also agree with me that it's pretty difficult to undertake a fair election when there are an estimated 300,000 or maybe 500,000 Indian troops in the area? Surely that has an impact.
David Ward.
I mean, what the members are saying is simple common sense and the reality of the situation that is there. We cannot go on pretending that things are the way we would like them to be. This is the reality that exists there. The reality is India and Pakistan will not give up what they believe to be their rights to certain parts of the princely state. They will not. It is ludicrous to continue with a belief that this will happen. And what we have to do is say, well, if that is the case, what can we then do to try and make life tolerable for those who have suffered for so long? Now, this may be regarded by some as giving up on ever trying to get rid of slavery or apartheid in South Africa. It's selling out to those particularly who seek independence. But in answer to the question about are Kashmiris given a vote, which Kashmiris are we talking about? Would Ladakhis regard themselves as Kashmiris? Would they? Who are we actually talking about? In totality, in Jammu Kashmir, Muslims constitute around about 67% of the population. Hindus 31%, and then the rest being Sikh or Buddhists. But in Jammu, Hindus constitute 65% of the population. Well, Muslims 31%, Sikhs 4%. In Ladakh, 46% are Buddhists. 6% Muslims, Hindus, and so on. Now, Gilgit-Baltistan is Muslim, as is Azad Jammu Kashmir. But even within AJK, the identity is really as much to do with Baradari. And believe me, I come from Bradford. I know about Baradari. And it is the identity there is as much to do with Baradari as it is religion. And the cultural and linguistic links are actually stronger with the Punjab than they are with the Kashmiris in the valley. This is the reality. Certainly.
Bob Blackman. I've listened with great interest to the Honourable Member's speech and his view about why we should be debating this particular issue. He seems to be suggesting that the Indian and Pakistani governments can't be trusted to reach some form of agreement on the future. Is he suggesting that either this country, the United Nations, or some other country should somehow force a solution? Because it seems to me that would be completely against the self-determination for the people of the Kashmir Valley. I mean, is that what he's suggesting?
David Ward.
I'm not suggesting that we should, and as I said very early on, in terms of the mediation role, and certainly not forcing them, but even taking on a mediation role, no, I do not see that as a part that we can play. But when we look at the close, strong links that we have with these countries, I do believe we have some part to play. And unless we actually acknowledge that and find what that part is, then we can only, you talk about trusting, this period of distrust, this failure, hasn't affected us, but it's resulted in thousands, hundreds of thousands of people dying. And that has an impact internationally, but also on the people that I represent.
Can I just say to the Honourable Gentleman, given Britain's legacy in India, I have to say I find the assumption or the presumption that somehow we should have a role to play actually slightly offensive. I think it smacks of neo-imperialism, I think it's arrogant, and I think actually we should respect the extraordinary achievements of India since 1947, and the fact that Britain has a role to play if and only when our advice or assistance is sought, and clearly in this case it is not.
David Ward.
Well, that's one view.
Do you agree with that view?
I believe we have a role to play, and I believe our task is to find what that role can be, and I'll come on to that a bit later on.
Steve Baker.
I'm rather reluctant to help the honourable gentleman out, but I just say on this, on this particular point that British Kashmiris are no more likely to ignore the issue of Kashmir than were Irish Americans likely to ignore the issue of Northern Ireland. We should just simply accept that in a representative democracy there is an absolute need for us to listen to our thousands of constituents and represent their views.
David Ward.
The big concern I have in response to the honourable member is that my doubt is whether some people actually want to get a solution, whether they actually want a solution to this. And I do believe that we have a part to play, but I will come on to that later. An opinion poll carried out in 2009 by Chatham House provided more evidence, if it was really ever needed, that the views of people on both sides of the line of control differ widely on a range of issues, and that wide differences also exist in the views of people from district to district, not only just in AJK or J&K. And they differ very, very much on terms of both the Pakistani and Indian administered Kashmir sides in terms of many, many areas. But the consensus view held by the people of both AJK and 75% and 82% in J&K is that the dispute is very important. They believe it is a very strong issue. They do not believe and have very little faith in the politicians to sort this out. So you may well trust them, but I'm telling you that the people of Jammu and Kashmir do not trust the politicians to sort it out. But it's also, when asked what was the most important thing to the people of the whole of the area, then 66% in AJK and 87% in J&K said unemployment. It was just basic, ordinary things, no different to the things that affect the people of our own country, in terms of wanting to get on in life, wanting to get a job, and wanting to look after themselves. When it came to political change, less than 1% in either AJK or J&K wanted the status quo. They wanted change. But just over 40% in both AJK and J&K wanted independence. But whereas the preference for independence was fairly uniform across AJK, it was very, very unevenly distributed in J&K. There is no evidence that either joining India or joining Pakistan would come close to obtaining more than a quarter of the total vote. Now, this was one opinion survey, but at least it provided an attempt to answer one of the most serious criticisms levelled at both India and Pakistan, namely that the views of those in both Pakistani and Indian administered Kashmir were not sufficiently heard in the debate about their future. At least it gave them a voice. I'd like to finish with the subject of human rights violations. Others I know will probably refer to this in more detail, and particularly about the atrocities that are being committed by the Indian Army. On hearing this debate, I was approached by various groups representing non-Muslim Kashmiris, and I was certainly made aware, or I knew anyway, that members of my own party were concerned that this would be an Indian-Bashi debate, and as an MP who represented a large Kashmiri community, many of whom originated from AJK, I would be biased in what I was saying. That's really quite disappointing for party colleagues to hold that view, and they clearly do not know me. I met with a small group of Kashmiri Pandits who told me of how many thousands of people from their community were forced to flee in fear from the Kashmir Valley. Many fled to Jammu, and I have to tell you, they still live in pretty intolerable conditions there to this day. If it cannot be agreed who is right and who is wrong when it comes to the decision about which country should Kashmir belong to, or indeed whether it should be independent of India or Pakistan, can it not be agreed that terrorist acts and the violation of human rights should not and will never provide a path towards that agreement? Until this peaceful path is found, can we not increase measures that normalise life through relaxed borders, demilitarisation, increased trade, removal of mines? But above all, as these measures begin to make life more tolerable for the long-suffering people on both sides of the line of control, can a commitment be made by both the Indian and Pakistan governments to refuse to allow the inevitable violent reaction to normalisation that is carried out by terrorists? Can there be a commitment that that will not derail normalisation measures? that they can and should continue. Whilst this certainly...
It's very difficult to follow gentleman's logic. Surely the terrorists, most of which penetrate from across the border from Pakistan, would like nothing more than the withdrawal of the Indian troops, who are there to protect the border and the integrity of the frontier. You know, if the troops withdraw, de facto, the terrorists will have won.
There is a strong argument that the terrorists need the armies as much as the armies need the terrorists, I have to tell you. And if you do not understand the power of the armies in both those countries, then I cannot understand how you can really understand the difficulties faced by the governments of both those countries, who have made steadfast efforts in the past to reach a peaceful solution. I would say that above all, as the various measures begin to make life more tolerable, as I said, for those on both sides of the line of control, as they have done in the past, they must ensure, and I repeat, they must ensure there is a commitment to continuing with the process of normalisation. And as the Honourable Member has said, whilst the issue remains unresolved, both India and Pakistan consider that this significant military presence is necessary in the region, which brings its own hardships and human rights abuses for the people. One of the most disappointing and perhaps tragic aspects of this whole saga is that both India and Pakistan have huge numbers of their own people living below the poverty line, and how much more money could be spent on health, education and development. And as aid providers, are you telling us we do not have a direct say or influence in that, or an interest in that? But if that money was spent on health and education rather than guns, mines and keeping standing armies of hundreds of thousands of troops, armies need enemies. They need an enemy to justify their existence. But how many hungry children die because the Kashmir dispute remains unresolved after all this time? I'd like to ask the Minister, we'll draw to a close, what our government is doing. Does it wash its hands of this British legacy? Is there no diplomatic pressure that it believes it can bring on the respective governments in order to find a lasting solution to the conflict, or at least move towards a process of normalisation for those that have suffered? And does he not see that the continuation of the conflict offers a real danger to international peace through the involvement of extreme elements in Kashmir? This is not patronising. This is not condescending. This is not about being judgmental. This is not about diplomatic finger-wagging. What we want to be is a friend to Pakistan and to India, but support for Pakistan as an ally in the war on terror, or India because of its power and value to us as a trading nation, or make up whatever reason you believe is right. It should not make us be afraid of being a critical friend. We look upon this whole Kashmir conflict with great sadness, not in a patronising way, but with great sadness, because we believe it holds back both Pakistan and India from what together they could be. Many people have helped me. I'd like to finish by thanking Victoria Schofield in particular for her contribution, her support and advice in this. But I'll finish with a quote from her book Kashmir in Conflict, in which she states that the fact that the world can be held in thrall because India and Pakistan, after over half a century, are still arguing about the respective positions on Kashmir, invokes international concern at the highest level. And that if nothing else, makes it of importance that we discuss it here in the UK Parliament. Thank you.
Order. It's clearly a very important debate which has attracted a lot of interest. We have until 4:30. There are 13 honourable members who are standing and wishing to speak. My humble role is to try and make sure that you all speak. And if the front benches start their remarks just after 4 o'clock, that would give them 10 to 15 minutes each. So if the 13 members speak for 8 minutes with no extra time for interventions, you can take interventions, but there'll be no extra time, then you'll all get in. That 8 minutes is a maximum, not an optimum.
Thank you very much indeed, and yes, I shall not require all of the time. Can I just thank everybody, those who have taken part in the debate and those who have attended today. I think it has been of value. I found it personally interesting to hear the different views on the subject, and I believe the debate has been conducted with a few exceptions, in the right spirit. I regret some of the speeches that I've heard today, I think, were written before coming here, as most of us did, but have not adjusted after I'd actually spoken. And I think some people were expecting, I serve a community which is made up of very diverse communities, Hindus, Sikhs, and it is known, I believe, a large Kashmiri community within it. And I feel that some of the speeches that were prepared today were prepared on the assumption that I would be pro-Pakistan and anti-Indian. And I feel that was unfair, because that is certainly not what I believe I did in my speech, and I did try to raise the concerns that people have on both sides about malpractices and indeed atrocities that have occurred and on both sides of the line of control. There were also some comments made about the debate itself being inflammatory, but it was strange that it seemed to me that those comments were made by those who made the most inflammatory speeches today, and indeed were more partisan than the rest of us. And I thought that was a great shame. One thing that has been discussed by many people is this whole question of whether it is right for us to discuss. Now, I'm bound to say this, am I not? But I thought the arguments in favour of the justification, our right, our obligation to raise this issue and to debate this issue, I thought the arguments were in favour of that. I would say that, wouldn't I? But I believe and still stick to my view that we do have that right, and I believe we've exercised it very well today. I was not very happy with the criticism from the honourable member from yourself, sir, Mr. Blackman. Harry's, sorry. About, it was a strange criticism really, because one of the arguments made was that it was not our business, so we should not be discussing that. It's for Pakistan and India to come up with a solution. We should not prescribe a solution. But then I was criticised for speaking for so long and not coming forward with a solution by yourself, which I found a rather strange argument to make, because I tried very, very carefully to avoid saying what I believed two countries and indeed the Kashmiri people should they themselves decide. I actually tried to avoid making that, whatever my own personal beliefs on the subject. While I'm on the subject of criticism, I also was very unhappy about the honourable member from Wolverhampton Southwest. I think it was something along the white middle-aged men comment, which I took exception to. I do not feel it necessary to apologise for not being from a very large community that I do my very, very best to represent. And I said something along the lines of patronising, or me saying I didn't want to patronise, but then suggested that I was in some way patronising, and I take exception to that. So what did I say? And what has been echoed by many others? First of all, I do believe this is an issue for us. And I welcome the comments that have been made by the Minister in accepting and acknowledging that and agreeing with me on that. What I also said is that until a solution, and it is not for us to come forward with that solution, but what I said is until a solution can be found, please do not support or commit atrocities. That is really the essence of what I was saying. This is, we know, a complex and difficult subject, and otherwise it would have been solved many years ago. But what I tried to emphasise was that violence on either side takes us never, ever closer to a final resolution of this. And I also said that and this is maybe where we can provide support, as a friend of Pakistan and India, to ensure that when the inevitable interventions, violent interventions take place, of terrorism on both sides, we try and ensure the support is there for both the Pakistan and the Indian government to not be blown off the course, to not be derailed from trying to introduce normalisation initiatives which make life simply more tolerable. This is a humanitarian issue that people have talked about. It isn't about land. It isn't about who it belongs to. It is about how we can make it more tolerable for those who are living and have lived in insufferable conditions for so long. And the final point I would make, which has been made by so many other members, is that when this solution is being considered, the people of Kashmir themselves must be part of that process. That is the message. Whatever the divide, whatever the opinions that we have, however strongly we feel it, the solution to this cannot and should not be arrived at without the voices of those people from Kashmir themselves. And I hope that is something that we can find common agreement on. Thank you.
The question is that this sitting be now adjourned. Order, order.